Hello everyone, Loremaster of Sotek here, bringing you a couple of new battles from the upcoming DLC, The Shadow and the Blade. And this is the last of the new maps that I wanted to show you guys. Welcome to Blood Fire Falls. So you've got a big old portal to what looks like the, probably from Nagaroth to here in the Chaos Waste. And boy howdy is this the Chaos Waste. So as you can see, it has the name Bloodfire Falls for good reason. It's a little gnarly. There is blood everywhere, not to mention a fair amount of lava. So this is a spectacular map. This is actually probably my favorite of the new maps. It's just very, very cool looking. Gives you definitely the feel of the Chaos Waste with floating islands with citadels upon them. You've got chaos architecture in the background, some dark elf architecture over here, and then there are just these like giant pools of blood all over the place. So like over here you can see this is literally just a river of blood pouring down next to this chaos altar and with tentacles coming out of the rock back there. Pretty crazy map, and there's even this giant blood puddle that you can fight in. But in any event, let's go ahead and go over the army. So as you may have heard, we're able to take the fancy dark elf stuff now, but I knew I was going up against the Skaven, and I think this is actually kind of a tricky matchup at the moment. So I didn't bring a whole lot of the new stuff, but what I did bring is Malus Darkblade on Spite, which, as you can see, he is just looking sharp. And I mean that in multiple ways. But Spite looks amazing. He is such a big, thick reptile. It's just ridiculous. He is so much, like, just larger than all the other cool ones behind him. And that armor, it looks so good. I just love the tail plates. But yeah, Spite is in the game now, and I love it. Malus Darkblade, of course, is riding on top. He looks great. He sounds great. And we'll check in with him later when he turns into Tz'arkan, which, in case you haven't seen his stuff, the main gimmick is his item is he has the Warp Sword of Cain, which gives him a permanent ward save, which is really nice. But most importantly, it lets him heal while he's in close combat, which you need, because his abilities are very powerful, but you have to pay health in order to use them. So for instance, he has the blood price, where basically he stabs himself, but he gets massive resistance. He gets an additional 22% ward save, but also gets a huge increase in damage. And then you have the Demon's Curse, where he also stabs himself, but it causes all enemies within 40 meters to lose a bunch of melee defense and leadership. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. We are playing against some Clan Eshin Skaven, who are led by the Deathmaster with a apprentice assassin following up behind him to provide that lovely trophy head. And then we've got double warp grinders, rad ogres, we've got Giselles followed up by the avalanche mortars, which is probably going to be a very, very typical build. These guys are kind of ridiculous. The avalanche mortars, you'll see here in a second. But with the game on the way, I'm moving all of my cold ones led by Malus through the blood puddles in the center of the battlefield. And here, my opponent does try and sneak around me, but unfortunately he didn't pop his concealment bombs. So I notice pretty quickly and decide I should probably do something about this and begin marching my way over. These guys do pop their concealment bombs, which will let them go invisible if they can get enough distance away from me, but you have to get pretty far. Here you can see I'm trying to use my bolt throwers to damage these avalanche mortars, but they just can't really land a hit, which is super unfortunate for some of my troops. Because yeah, that was only like, yeah, they're at half health from a single volley. Back here, though, we are getting some good work done. I did put some Witch Elves because I figured there'd be some Eshin silliness, and Witch Elves are really, really good against Clan Eshin because you can berserk them, therefore dragging them into a fight. and actually get a lot of really, really good work done. So here, Snitch is going to be going crazy, just doing all of his crazy acrobatics and flips and other nonsense. We'll let him fight. But just, I love the animations he does when he attacks with his tail. But that's enough on Snitch. Let's go check in with Big Daddy over here. So I've got Malus Darkblade here fighting alongside my Cold Ones. Unfortunately, we are caught in an earthquake right now due to the Warp Grinders. You can see they are drilling into the ground itself. But Malus has got this. That's me popping my Blood Price ability, which shows up kind of like a sort of cane. And him and Spite are just going to be going to town against all these Skaven. You might think Malus, oh, Malus is super outnumbered. He doesn't stand a chance. Nah, Malus has got this. He is a solid melee combatant, and he can do some really, really high amounts of damage. And of course, he's regenerating the entire time he's fighting, as long as his leadership is decent. So he's actually doing really, really well. Meanwhile, back here, we have gotten a full surround on these big old pockets. Snitch here is going to unleash his warp daggers, which is going to hurt quite a few of my guys and send them scattering, but I do have him kind of locked down at the moment. Unfortunately, my Witch Elves are more on this Assassin, which is not where I wanted them. I should have been trying to take out Deathmaster, but, you know, it happens. I do decide to go ahead and try my best to finish off the Assassin, get a nice pendulum over there, but so far things aren't going so hot. All of my Cold Ones are pretty much dead due to the Giselles and the Avalanche Mortars. Most of my front line has been wiped out by the Avalanche Mortars, and Malus is doing pretty well back here. I do pop the Demon's Curse, which is going to be lowering the leadership and melee defense of all these Rat Ogres. So basically every time Malus swings, he's killing a Rat Ogre, like almost every time, just because he has such insane melee attack. And he does really, really solid damage. But as you can see, things are not looking good. I took more of a wide formation, thinking that might save me a little bit of effort from these Poison Wind Mortars, but sadly that is not the case. I do send a lot of my army after Snitch to hopefully try and catch him, and I let the Witch Elves just pursue him on their own, but he's just so fast. If you don't have Cav, he just can easily outrun you. Meanwhile, over here, I did manage to beat the Rat Ogres back, at least to the point that he gave up on me to go focus on the Corsairs. So Malus is able to jump in here and hopefully start ripping these Giselles into pieces, buying the rest of my army some time while I try and regroup what troops I have. Poison Wind Mortars have lost about half of their ammunition, which is not great because they've gotten a lot of kills, and here you can see they are just shredding my troops. Every single time one of those little things lands, it does so much damage. They've already got 232 kills. I'm playing Dark Elves, not Greenskins, not Skaven. I'm not running a lot of troops, so 250 kills on a single unit means that I am not doing my job. Probably gonna need to bring like harpies or a manticore, a feral manticore in the near future, just to have something that can jump on these guys immediately from the get-go and stop them. My sorceress is defeating the assassin by just I just cyclocharged him a little bit, ran him over, popped Enfeebling Fall on him, yada yada. Here, all of these guys do try and get a good surround on Malus, but I do pop the Blood Price, that way he can duel with his Warlock Engineer. I also had the Demon's Curse up. I find it's best to use Malus's abilities while he has the Demon's Curse up, just because that 22% damage resistance will protect you from your own abilities too. Unfortunately, I'm eating a bunch of Poison Ninja Stars, but that's not going to protect this Warlock Engineer. He's still getting slapped. I am pulling in what troops I can. Unfortunately, I probably should have just kept chasing Snitch and just not brought my army back until these guys were dealt with or they were out of ammo. Because you can see I brought my Witch Elves back, and now these guys are at 301 kills. Because these mortars just, you know, they blow up, they split up in the air, and they just delete your face. They're so brutal. I mean, they are an expensive unit, but they're very efficient right now, and very hard to deal with. So here I've got Malus dealing with the Gutter Runners. I'm not out of the running yet. I do see Deathmaster Snitch coming for me, so I do pop the Demon's Curse a little early here, but my goal was just to break these guys. It lowers their leadership by 16, so I'm just trying to get them to break That way I can make sure the Giselles aren't able to shoot me. But unfortunately, they keep stabbing me in the butt with poison, and they also have nets, so I'm just being slowed a bunch. So I do send in the Hellburnai to try and slow down those lads. Meanwhile, my army is actually doing okay, despite being massively outnumbered back here. Like, I am occasionally getting off really nice hits, the occasional pendulum doing lots and lots of damage, but here comes the Deathmaster. So he tries to be sneaky with that little concealment bomb, but I know he's coming. I saw him earlier. So I'm just waiting really carefully for him to get close. I pop the Demon's Curse, and now I transform. And Tz'arkan. So I immediately turn into Tz'arkan while the buff is still active, and then I pop the ability called the Reaper of Souls, which you can actually see all those souls being eaten by Tz'arkan. Because the problem with Tz'arkan, well, his issue is that he constantly takes damage. See here, every maybe second or half second, he loses about 40 health. So I do what damage I can to Snitch, and my Sorceress is able to kind of chase him off and bully him with Miasma. But I realize that I really need to get Snitch off the field if I even want to stand a chance. So I break away from the Rat Ogres, and Snitch may be fast, but he's not that fast. And Tz'arkan is thankfully able to get up on him and do enough damage that I'm able to shatter him. Bit of friendly fire coming in here from the mortars. They are not the most accurate. That's the other ability called Bloodstorm that you can pop with Tz'arkan, where he just detonates and it does a ton of damage. But and it also gives you a notable gives you a bunch of damage resistance. So Snitch at this point has shattered. He decides, you know what, I don't want to fight the giant demon, so I'm getting surrounded. But worry not. Aid comes from my wizard. There are rat bits going everywhere. Fortunately, there are still a lot of dragon ogres about, but at this point I figured, okay, I'm not in a great position, but I killed all of the Skaven leadership. I killed the Warlock Engineer. I shattered Snitch. I'm in the clear. I can just break all these Skaven from Fear and Terror. I get off Reaper of Souls here, so I'm regenerating a ton of health and doing constant damage to everyone caught in its effect. But I made a mistake, my dear viewers. I made a critical mistake. See, my Sorceress earlier had been chasing around an Assassin. You can see these guys are drilling in the ground in it again, locking me in place and doing damage to me. I had thought I had killed the Assassin hero, but I didn't. At least not to the extent that I had hoped. He has 400 health left and decided to come back. And because he came back, unfortunately, the Skaven overall are not shattering as efficiently as I need them to. So Malus dies. He's getting shot by Giselles, and his health drains over time. And he cannot out-heal it if he's taking damage. So it took me too long to realize that this assassin was still alive. So I'm like desperately trying to shoot him down with my crossbows, getting down to 300 health, just thinking maybe if I get him down, I could get off one last pendulum and just mass shatter the Skaven. But unfortunately, it's just not enough. It took me way too long to push the Giselles back and to take the mortars offline. I needed way more cav, or I needed just way more flying units, like Harpies, Manticores. You know, units that, although a little pricey, I can at least shut off those freaking mortars for a couple seconds. You know, buy me valuable time. But unfortunately, my Sorceress gets surrounded, she shatters, and with that, it is game. So, it was a really, really fun game. The mortars got over 300 kills just blowing up all my stuff. And they're such a tricky unit just because you can't beat them by being tanky. You know, a lot of the time when your opponent takes a really heavy shooty army, you think, oh, I'll just bring a unit that's either so durable they can't be killed, or I'll bring a unit that's spread out enough they can't be killed, or I'll just bring a lot of mass infantry that can't be killed. But at least with Elves, that's not going to cut it, Chief. Those things hit at such a wide spread, they will just delete your face. But that will be it for this first replay. It was a ton of fun. Even though I was defeated in the end, I think it was a really good showcase of Malus whipping up on people. Like, he can carry an army really, really well, But of course, when you take Malus, that means you have to take a separate wizard. You know, you don't have Malekith, and he's not cheap. But man, is he great. Basically, having 2 life bars is really, really solid. Anyway, let's go ahead and head into the next replay. Alright, everybody, welcome back to the another battle. This time we're in Bretonnia at the Sword of Torgald, and I'm leading my army with Tehenhauin, the Prophet of Sotek. I'm going back to my namesake, going back to Big Papa, so that I can flex my muscles against some nasty, nasty Dark Elves. So, of course, you probably want to see all the new stuff, primarily over the old classics. So here, right back here, we've got the Bloodrack Medusa, the lady with way too many snake heads, who is actually a pretty interesting unit. She does have a devastating shooting attack that she only has 18 shots. But this thing moves so fast, it basically hits the instant she fires it, regardless of if you're at max range or not. And she's not a terrible melee combatant. She actually does really, really well against armored infantry, and especially units that she can get in a charge in. She has a pretty devastating charge attack where she covers a lot of distance, but I love the model. She really, really looks cool, and I look forward to being able to show y'all her voice lines, because they gave her a really nice voice. Leading the army, we of course have Malus Darkblade back in the saddle, backed up by a sorceress, this time also of shadows, like I took in the last game. And then on each flank, we have a unit of Scourge Runner chariots, which are pulled by the creepy-ass horses that Dark Elves have, that are way too skinny and have sharp teeth, because Dark Elves have to be just edgy at everything they do. And these guys have these big honkin' bolt throwers, or like handheld bolts, that you can see the size of the things they're shooting are just massive arrows, or bolts rather. And these things will ruin your day if you are a large target. I mean, they're pretty effective against just about everything, but he has 2 of them, and you'll get to really see their madness here in effect in a second. Unfortunately for my opponent, he did start right on top of my Chameleon Skinks with these Dark Riders, and that went about as well as could be expected. But without further ado, let's get into the madness. So I've got Chameleon Skinks, and I thought, oh, they could trade shots with the Scourge Runner Chariot. And meanwhile, I've got my Pterodons coming in from the back. Now watch this. So these Pterodons have very, very high missile resistance, and each one of those bolts actually cleaves a significant amount of damage off if they connect. Only 1 bolt connected that time, but they can do really solid damage. But of course, these Dark Elves are about to have a payload. Yep, delivered on them. And I'm already having to pull my Pterodons back, because the Scourge Runner Chariots are going to give them a really bad time if they don't skedaddle. Yeah, that does a couple hundred damage easily. And the other thing about these Scourge Runner Chariots is you may think, oh, because they don't have cold ones, they're really bad at melee. Not so. They still actually have a very decent anti-infantry on their attacks. They just don't have as much AP. It's kind of their only downside compared to cold one chariots. But here we've got Crocsgores trying to explode chariots, just like back in the good old tabletop days. Because there used to be a time in tabletop where there were rules where if you hit a chariot with a high enough strength attack, it would just explode. And boy, do those, I miss those days. So here we've got Spike going in against my Feral Stegodon alongside a bunch of troops, and I decide, I don't like this wizard. So I'm going to send in the Colossadon Hunters and Tehenhauin to try and ruin her day, but she is very, very fast. So I decide to make a pit stop on the Bloodrack Medusa instead. And she actually gets punted pretty hard. But I do have a Feral Manticore going for the troops. But this lady is not a huge slouch in combat. Like, she can actually fight pretty well. Granted, the Colossadon Hunters are going to put her in a trash can. Mainly because she is not an anti-large combatant, and they are anti-large combatants. And she does not have a lot of armor. She only has like 30 armor. And she's going to rip them up pretty good. But Tehenhauin's going to duel against her for a little bit. Meanwhile, Malus here is just living through, basically, I don't know if you've ever seen the old movie Birds, but Malus is basically just getting swarmed by flying piranha at this point. And this is a Jurassic Park movie he does not want to be in. That is not a good matchup for him. Over here, Tehenhauin does manage to claim victory over the Bloodrack Medusa, just as a Pit of Shades gets opened on my army way over there. But thankfully, Malus is getting ripped apart by Saurus and the Ripperdactyls. And I'm still getting as many Manticores as I can out in the field to just keep the shooting units busy. Meanwhile, you can see the Chariots are actually doing quite well for themselves, and Malus at this point does break and is running off, but I'm not going to let him come back. I sent a Manticore. Make sure he doesn't get his transformation, but he just gets escorted off the battlefield before he decides to make a comeback. But these Scourge Runner Chariots have done a really easy job just running around, running over my skinks. They have no issue dealing with light infantry like that. Both of my Chameleon skink units actually got shattered, or broken off, and had to retreat quite a bit before the Chariots were pulled off and decided to come mess with me in the center of the board. Unfortunately, though, they're not going to trade very well against the Ripperdactyls. And I still think, honestly, against both the Skaven and the Dark Elves, the new units especially, I really think speed-based plays or flying-based units are going to be the way to go. I mean, those Scourge Runner Chariots firing 360 while they move is just the best thing. And yeah, that one was pretty quick. I did take a super-duper aggressive build, and Tehenhauin, of course, really excels when he can just dominate the air, in my opinion. I think that's probably his best build, unless you're just trying to save money, of course, in which case you can take him on foot or his horned one. Engine of the Gods, I love it, but the laser beam you have to pay so much money for, and it's so slow that most players dodge it, or worse, lure your own troops into it. And with all the leadership gone, the Dark Elves just decided, you know what, this is a party we don't want to be in. So unfortunately, Malus was not able to claim any victories today, but he did make a noble effort in our hearts at the very least. And of course, yesterday when this embargo dropped, you could catch a ton of Malus footage. And I know a number of people who slapped their opponents using Malus Darkblade, which the character I think is great. I know in all my games, I suffer from the issue that I don't know how to play Dark Elves. Every time I play them, I'm like, my army's so small, and all the monsters are so expensive. Like, I love how cheap Stegodons are. But in any event, hope you guys enjoyed seeing a little bit of those new units, and we'll go ahead and hop into today's final battle. Alright, welcome everyone to the last battle for today's video, where Clan Eshin has been hired to come out and deal with a certain infamous problematic dancer on his big old piece of bacon. Spleen Rippa. Wurzag he's been causing too much ruckus in the neighborhood with all his dance parties, and we've been sent out here to put him down. So for new units, the big things that I'm running is I have a Clan Eshin Sorcerer over here who actually just cast Skitterleap on my Poison Wind Mortars. So these guys are now invisible and have a speed bonus, but they're backed up by Jezzails. It gets Zap Zap. I also have the back of my army supported by the Eshin Triads, which are wielding, I think people in the chat were telling me these are Guandos, which are Chinese weapons, which is perfectly suited, so they probably got the idea or stole them out of Cathay, one of the two. And then I've got two Warp Grinders holding my flanks, ready to do some hardcore drilling, and a whole buttload of Clan Rats and Skaven Slaves. But the real surprise I've got up my sleeve is I've got two units of Gutter Runners with Poison. So they've got the Poisonous Ninja Stars and Poison Melee attacks, and leading them is the Master Assassin, who actually has a pretty deadly missile attack that also does poison, so he can slow you down and deal poison at range with pretty significant, I think, anti-infantry. Yep. And then if he gets into combat, he has a Weeping Blade and further bonus versus infantry. And then for items, he can actually take some really cool stuff. So he's got the Rival High Talisman for that lovely nuke to melee attack. Oh, there goes some Ninja Stars. And then he's also got the Sacred Banner of the Horned Rat, which actually allows him to nerf the leadership of all enemies within 55 meters. Going. Boom! Dead Spider. Over here, though, mass chaos is kind of erupting across the battlefield. I decided I did not want to deal with these Doom Divers because I didn't want to risk trading with them in range. So the Avalanche Mortars are just obliterating stuff, while Ikid Zap Zap is going to focus Wurzag. which it gets Zap Zap is one of the most deadly weapons to greenskins, because when it hits, it causes all of their abilities to go on cooldown, and it also is very accurate and hits very hard and ignores physical resistance, so Wurzag literally has nothing against this. And his Wah is now on cooldown, which he has to get the combat to turn around, and he's just not having a good time. Back here, though, I am being chased around by lots of cav units. My Eshin Triads, which are invisible until you get close enough, are doing their damnedest to protect my line. But here, I'm going to get a nice, good catch against these Wolf Riders and Spider Riders. I'm going to run up my drills and start digging. So here, they pop both of the drill abilities, so they're dealing damage over time with Earthquake, and then got Seismic Stare, and this is also letting my Triads get in on them and just start cutting people down. That's going to do a bunch of really, really solid damage. Some of my backline is getting messed up a bit, but the Triads are doing a really good job tearing units apart. And here I get another catch with this unit of Warp Grinders, and now we've got Ninja Star City over here, which is just going to rip apart all of these Night Goblins and ranged units. Yeah, the Assassin effortlessly can just tear down greenskins. So things are looking pretty dicey for my opponent. Wurzag got blown apart by Ikid Zap Zap, and now the Spider Rider is facing a similar fate. Here I popped an ability called Veil of Shadows, which this, coming from the Eshin Sorcerer, basically just creates impassable terrain. So you notice these orcs, A, they're getting stagger locked because of this, and B, they can't go through this at all. Like, this is literally like a big old wall that you can't run through, and it lasts for a pretty good long while. So now that it's up, they can start to run through it. But you can use that, like I basically used it between his army and mine to just buy me a good amount of space and time to reorganize my back lines here a bit. Because although I have pretty much punted the greenskin leadership into the ground, a lot of my units are very low quality, so I do need to be very, very careful with not getting overwhelmed or surrounded. And that was a bunch of friendly fire. Great job, Skaven. But here, my assassin decides he's going to go in on the Goblin Big Boss. I do pop his unique ability, which is called Looming Dread, which not only slows the Goblin Big Boss a buttload, but it also lowered his missile resistance by 22%, so he was actually taking a ton of bonus damage. And then I popped the Rival Hide Talisman to try and save these guys. Spoiler, it didn't work. Over here, I actually get a good catch with my Warp Grinders. So they're actually doing significant damage to all these units, even though their leadership's close to breaking. Over here, the Night Goblin Archers are trying to do a lot of damage to the Master Assassin, but unfortunately for them, he has very little armor, but he has fairly high physical resistance at 30%. Oh, and here's that Veil of Shadows. So you see, I dropped it in the middle of these greenskins, and it's just going to blow them all apart. And most of them are completely stagger locked. So these units are basically immobile, and there's this big old gap. And the cool thing is, if you're the person who cast the spell, if you're the Skaven player who cast it, you can actually move through this without penalty. So your Skaven can run through all of this shadow with no issue. So it's very, very strong. And even after it's over, it breaks up your enemy formation, which makes them very, very vulnerable to charges and a bunch of other stuff. So here my Warp Renders are going to charge in, and any second now they're hopefully going to start drilling. But the Avalanche Mortars are in range, so these greenskins are about to have a really, really bad time as all of those Poison Wind mortar globes just come swooping down and just start dealing tons of damage. Because this is where this thing really shines. Like, it's borderline a little bit overpowered, I think. It's very expensive, but if you don't have a counter to it, it is just, oh man, it is so brutal. So it's going to easily chew up all those greenskins. Already up to 150 kills, despite the fact that it did get shut down for a little bit. And at this point, I just run around cleaning up a few greenskins, but with all of their leadership gone, they are going to break and shatter. And that is going to be it. So yeah, hopefully you guys all enjoyed the games. They're a lot of fun. I think for me personally, I think the new Skaven units are, well, I think both of them are super duper fun to play with. I'm a little more partial towards the Skaven right now, as far as like multiplayer goes, but I think that's mostly because of my inexperience with Dark Elves as opposed to anything else, so I just need to get in some more practice. That being said, I'm really excited to start showing you guys campaign stuff in the near future. Because let's be honest, although I really appreciate multiplayer and can enjoy playing it, my real bread and butter, my one true love is campaign, the storylines, and all that other stuff. So yeah, hopefully this will hold you guys over for a few more days, and then we'll be able to just kind of keep showing more and more and more until release day, and you all can just dive in. So thank you all so much for watching. I will catch you guys next time. Have a great day.